Good morning. I'm Marcello Palazzi. I'm the second chair of Avalon Foundation, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Martin for many, many years. So I'm going to just kick off the other session, the next session. Before I do that, I would like a bit of action in the room. So please turn to your left or your right, someone you have not yet spoken. Say hello, this is my name, and this is why I'm here. Just take one minute or half a minute. I'm going to continue. So other than being a friend of Martin, my first company actually, which I started with my father 35 years ago, was in soil analysis. So we made laboratories, big laboratories, as small testing kits for soil and water to actually determine, to reduce the use of fertilizers, basically, because fertilizers have been a big problem in the last 30 years. So I feel quite close to you, and my day job is I have a big title of Global Ambassador for the B Corp movement. The B Corps is a movement of 2,670 companies, best for the world companies. We have 221 companies in the food industry. So in the next session, I'm going to say something about some of these companies. But there is, I clearly see acceleration in what Martin and many of you have started, this organic revolution. Some of the bigger companies are also, we have to be careful, but sometimes have good intentions in actually embracing this organic revolution. So I'll say a bit more later on and in the session. And now I'm going to introduce the next speaker. And I want to make sure that the slides are on. Is everything working? So the next speaker is Professor Hans Herren, who's a board member of IFOAM. And I've met him once or twice, and I've always been impressed by his talks. He's very distinguished in his work, and he's going to talk about the SDGs and organic agriculture, etc. So, Professor Hans Herren, the floor is yours, and I think you have 20, 25 minutes.
Okay, good morning. A pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Martin, and also Darko. A bit on a short notice, but I will do my best. Anyway, so glad to be here with the IFOAM World Board. So we have our meetings, and I think that fits very well in between, gives us fresh ideas also. So, where is the gadget? Yeah, okay. All right, so yeah, we'll talk a little bit about SDGs. I think we heard 1.5%. It is really not enough. I mean, this number has been there for how many years now? Now we got to do something, and I think we have now a framework. So I'll talk about it a little bit more. So first, okay, we shouldn't be talking too much about what's wrong, but I think it's, it depends who is in the room. We need sometimes to repeat a few things, because we have to think, instead of what do we have to change in the system. So malnutrition is still there, and again, it has a lot to do with organic farming, because we need better quality, we need nutritious food, and not just empty calories as is produced mostly in industrial agriculture these days. Environmentally unsustainable, we're actually creating our own problem. We're killing ourselves with our agriculture. Again, with the little exception of 1.5%. But I think if you look at most of the places we go, you can see things are done wrong. And actually, even in a lot of the organic area, and I live in California now, I have a little organic vineyard. My neighbors are all organic farmers. Some are doing quite well, and others are still, I think, need to improve their practices too, because they're actually, half the time the land is just bare in between planting. And so, again, I think there is a lot to say that even in organic and agroecology, things need to improve. The social aspects, so these are the three dimensions of sustainable development. On the social aspect also, we have tremendous problems in farming. Being in developed countries, as we just heard, who wants to be a farmer? There's no money in it, it's hard work, a lot of risks. And so who is looking after that? The consumers, and we'll come up later on, actually most of them don't really care. And so that's why we're in the situation we are in today, and that's why we need to do something. And I'm glad to see here a lot of younger people, because it's time to really start to do something. And also food is culture, right? It's agriculture, and I think we need to do more in that direction. Did I miss something here? Oh, no. I just want to show you this because the numbers are staggering, as you all know, when what's going on. And partly the chemicals we use in agriculture, many of them are part of the endocrine disruptor chemicals. And the costs are just enormous. With only a fraction of this money, we could change the system. But we are not. We keep buying that stuff like, oh, it's cheap, so don't worry, right? And efficiency, so yeah, we want more efficiency. We want to large scale, cheaper. Because cheap food is a God-given right for a lot of people. And so that's why we end up with this type of landscape. That's wrong. We want different landscapes, much more diverse. Even in here, we have too much monocrops, for example, to be a really sustainable system. So again, I think we know much better. So then we look at the connection now to how we can actually make that change. And since 1992, Agenda 21 started actually with two areas, soil and pollination. At the time there was a big emphasis on it. Think about it, that's now 30 years ago. 20, sorry. And what had we done? No? Oh, sorry. Yeah, this thing is not working, you know, somebody is unfortunate. But on the Agenda 21, in America, I was told by some ranchers who live nearby that this is a communist plot to finish the US, Agenda 21. Oh, just to say, okay? Then came 10 years later about the Millennium Development Goals, the UN Development Goals, which were only for developing countries. So I tried to change and make more sustainable development. And interesting wise, just after that, in 2002, there was the original Rio conference, 92, came the summit in Joburg. And what happened there is that 6 UN agencies and more than 30 countries decided to write a report on agriculture, just like we had the ecosystem assessment report, or the GEO report, IPCC reports. We're going to have one on agriculture. And so that was commissioned and executed and published in 2009, about now almost 10 years ago. And that actually was the most detailed report on agriculture and what needs to be done. And basically what it said, business as usual is not an option, and we need a fundamental change of the paradigm in agriculture. All right, it's written there. It's 59 countries signed, none has done anything about it. Except for the NGOs around the world who picked up this report, kept pushing. And what happened eventually is that the next step in the SDGs, that report, you can actually read through the lines there and find a lot of what was said in that report is now reported back in those SDGs, and many of them, they're all connected as we know. And so we have now a framework we didn't have before, since 3 years. And that framework, oh, thank you. I think is very important because we now can say, yeah, it's the law. People, every country, 193 countries are signed. And we heard before, in the Netherlands, people are taking the government to task because they're not doing it. We can do this everywhere for every goal. What are we waiting for? So, part of the problem in agriculture really is that, you know, we had this sort of idyllic type of agriculture, right? I mean, years ago. It was not always perfect, but at least we had a system where more or less neutral. And we had on the bottom here, there's this is what we call ecosystem services. So basically, nature was giving us help to do their job. What happened? That wasn't good enough for the business people. I mean, it's free, right? So cannot make any business. So what we did, and actually that system also, you know, was able to sequester carbon in addition to being neutral. So what we did, we removed those ecosystem services. We replaced them with large-scale irrigation, fertilizer, GMOs, hybrid seeds, name it. And you see what happened to the guy up there? It just went upside down. So this is what happened. Ecosystem services, and we talk a lot about it. You know, we need to really say this is essential. That's what is helping us do the job, not something we have to pay for, which then it kills us on top of it. And when you look at the connection with the SDGs, so just some examples here. All right, health and hunger up here, climate. In the ecosystem services, we have the water, we have the biodiversity, and again also erosion and going into the ocean, killing life in the sea. Then we have the farmers here, who also have been replaced with machines, right, most of the time. And again, we have the problem of gender, peace, justice, inequalities. So you can see that this system, actually, if we were to look at where we can actually have handles to do things, in these and also many of the other goals. Now, why do we need to do something? Why do we just say we have only 10 years to go? Is because, again, here you can see that in climate change, again, agriculture also has quite, maybe we can see it. Oh, no, sorry, there's something missing here. There was a big red arrow there, actually, because now we are way out going in the red here also, and a lot has to do with agriculture. So if we can do it, I think we can undo it, as Peggy Meyer said before. The other big problem we have is nitrogen. We know from experience, and I've worked long enough in Africa to know this, we actually don't need nitrogen fertilizer, synthetic one. We can produce enough. In proper rotation, proper agricultural systems, you can do it. And there's a lot of calculations out there. I know, there's a lot of people dispute these numbers, but again, if we really want to do it, we can do it. And when you look at the true cost issues or externalities, a study here done in England, 2005 already, shows that the actual cost, 1,500 versus 390, for, again, this is the different, the cost for current agriculture, okay? So you can see that these costs here, you're paying them with your taxes. Why not add a little bit to the food, and then you're in control? Nobody dictates what you actually have to pay. And so to me, it looks like this will be very important. So again, you know, agroecology, organic agriculture, annually 3.0, we heard that before. I think, to me, it looks like this is really emerging very much along the same line. And I think that we really have to see this as one goal where we want to go to. The problem with organic, actually, if you look what is the problem with certification, it adds cost. When I go and shop somewhere in a store, when you go into the store or the restaurant, what you buy and eat, you assume the government has checked it, it is good and healthy, right? But what you do, you go and buy organic because there's a little label on it saying it's good. What's wrong with that picture? Where is government who is supposed to check? So organic has to be the rule, not the exception. And we should actually tax and label everything else. That would make sense. It would make it cheaper, not more expensive. Or maybe not very much more expensive. But again, we're in a world where we have a system now established, difficult to get out of it. Trying to check time, yeah, okay. So the expectation now, you know, we have agroecology, we're organic 2.0, we have permaculture, we have a lot of elements, I think, to change, transform agriculture. And again, you know, we don't have to do it only one way, we can do it different ways, but I think we want to go and really look at these issues of multifunctionality, which is very important. So, when we look next, we want to, in order to change, we have to change also the consumption. And I think what's important here is from a consumption where we have a lot of meat and dairy products, Sorry, but I see a lot of it around here in the field. This is not the way we're going to solve our problem in agriculture. Partly only, but I think we have to change the diet. And if we change our diets, I think we can go back here. And, you know, if you look at the global scale, we just cannot continue with the diets we have, right? We live on a limited planet, and I think we have to understand that. So there has to be a change. And I'm part of the IPES Food, the International Panel of Experts on Food Systems. And we came up with a report called From Uniformity to Diversity. And there we make the point, you know, that we need to transition subsistence, conventional agriculture, and also the industrial to something different. There's hardly anything out there which will meet the standards, except, again, organic 3.0, agroecology, permaculture, I think, which would lead us here. But we have problems there. We also have a problem of productivity. We have a problem that we need much more research. Until today, and even today, in America, in Switzerland, my own country, we spend 95% of the research money into the old agriculture. Green evolution stuff, fertilizer, pesticides, and less than 5%, actually it's more like 1.5 in organic, in agroecology. How you want to change the system? Not possible. We need research. Actually, in California where I live, the farmers now hire their own scientists. We're near Davis, California, but they hire their own scientists to do their work because even at a university, they don't want to do this. Because they need research. They need to figure out how can we do this better. So we want to change? Yes, we want to change. And I think what, you know, the report addresses a number of issues. I guess many of you know it. I won't go into the details here. But really, we need this transformation, this transition of agriculture. And the solutions are the solutions. Sure, they are in the soil. They're under our feet, as you know. Many of you know that. Nothing new there. The only problem is, you know, they call it dirt in many places, or dreck in German. No, it's soil. It's life. And sure, it became dreck and dirt because there's nothing left in it. Because we kill all the worms, we kill all the life in the soil, which is essential. Healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy people, healthy environment, right? So if you don't start with the right one, you're never going to go anywhere. Problem. And right now there's a new study done in Switzerland, financed by my foundation partly, and they're listening to what's going on in the soil. Actually, there's a world premiere on, you can actually listen to what's going on down there, and you can listen to, by listening to the soil, you can actually evaluate its health. You can deduct its fertility, for example. So they're working on this. Very interesting, right? Better than to go dig with the shovel and figure out what's going on there. We just put the microphone down and you listen. So you go to the Paul Klee Museum in Switzerland next weekend, you can see it. We know what to do, you know. This field doesn't get any nitrogen from the bag. It's all done by this plant down here. It's possible. Nobody should tell me it's not possible, because I know it is. I spent 30 years in Africa doing these things. So we know. In addition, when you do it right, you have no pest problems, you don't have disease problems, because the plant do react. They defend themselves. They can do that. We tried this with hybrids. Null reaction. Eaten up by the bugs. Again, farmers have selected the right thing over the eons. And these varieties produce and out-yield the hybrids. Because healthy soil. So it's all possible. We don't have to invent. In addition, CO2 goes in there and nitrogen. So we want also a system where there is more biodiversity. And this system is actually organic. You can see how much more species richness you have there. 50% more species richness, which increases your resilience. And here you can even look at the output, the same thing. So the productivity is actually higher. The productivity, not the kilogram per hectare. Who cares about that? We have too much emphasis. We need more food? Yeah, maybe. Depends where, what, grown by whom. And I think in America, in Europe, we should produce less because we can do with less. We throw less away. It should be more expensive. And in developing countries, we show we can double. We treble and quadruple the production in Africa without any inputs, not even water, with the normal water. Again, can be done. And so when you look at Africa, that's where we need to double. We can do it. And elsewhere, the world, in average, or in where do we go? Latin America, the Caribbean, a bit less. But basically, everywhere we need more, we can do more. And where we have, like in here, we can do less. It's good. And this is another example. Convention is 100. In developing countries, it goes to 180. In industrialized countries, a bit less. Who cares? We're throwing away 30% or 40%. So the question is, if we know all this, why is it not happening? Why is it not happening? And why? It's because we have a concentration of power. Too many people are controlling, or maybe few people, big companies are controlling the whole thing. And we let this happen. And this is part of that report. And you see, people expect cheap food, right? As we said before. Oh, we want to export. Everyone wants to export. Why? The neighbor can produce themselves. All right, there's going to be exchanges. But I think the basic stuff has to be produced where it's consumed. The measure of success, kilogram per hectare, not nutrition per hectare. Short-term thinking, everything is short-term. And linear, not system. The connection in the system need to be thought about. So we need to change this. And you know the concentration, I don't have to insist here, it's even getting worse. And this one here is all these colors. Again, a few people control the whole food market, more than 90%. This has to change. This cannot go on. And you, the consumer, can decide on this in the end. So we said it in the report, and we need to really implement it. Now, we have zero hunger is in the middle. These are all the SDGs, and you can see it's connected everywhere. The connections are there. Why don't we use them? And you go to the targets. I don't have time to go into details here, but they're all, you can see the connections. So we really need to make a very, very big effort in connecting the dots, and we have that framework. Let's use it. We won't have another one. And because you can see that, oh, that came a bit fast, too bad. But there's another way of arranging the goals, you know, what's good for the planet, the people, the prosperity. So, you know, the people have tried to rearrange these SDGs in many different ways to make it really attractive. But you go down the street here, you say SDGs, how many people do you think know what you're talking about? But exactly, so why is this? Because the media are controlled by those few I mentioned before. That's why this message don't go out. So we have a duty to go and tell this. SDGs is the thing we need to do now. And I think you'll see why it is now, and that's what I mentioned before by a friend. Why is it now? Because of this issue of climate change, 10 years, 10. Young people here, what are you doing about that? What do you think is going to happen? And we heard it before from Peggy, you know, what's going on? So, and agriculture is the thing. We can do it. If we don't do it in agriculture, all the rest doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. Airplane will keep flying, right? Electric cars will come but slow because the whole industry is there. But agriculture, we have that in our hands. We can do it, so we need to do it. Unfortunately, my own country is a disaster. We had 2 initiatives to change the food system, twice down the drain. It's an insult, it's a scandal. My own country. 30% of the people went to vote. And only 30% actually said we should have a fair food initiative and we should have a food sovereignty initiative. Incredible. In a country where people spend 6% of their money on food, they reacted to the industry's last-minute huge campaign. The food will be more expensive if you accept these initiatives. So food cost is on the way, and I think this is the leverage point. So again, I think we need to work harder in that direction because latest report UNEP is out, and I think we can do it. But we need to get people involved in this process. And so what we're doing, a lot of people out there, we're trying to have meetings with the stakeholders, the farmers, the consumers, the academicians, the private sector, government. We need to sit around the table and look at those pictures, what I showed before, and say, hey, we got to do something. And then we try something, we can test this with scenario models, we say, what happened if I do this or that? Everybody got to look, we like it, we don't like it, and then eventually you get there. It's a spiral, it's a system where we take more and more people into. But we can do that like in a group like here, we're all already on the same side of the fence, more or less. So I think we need to reach out, and the SDGs are giving us the way forward. Okay, I think I went over my time already, so you can read that in the last minutes. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask for a smart question. Who would like to ask a smart question? And then, of course, we have a second speaker and we have a conversation. So who wants to feel like you want to ask or make a comment to what Hans said? Come on, some courage. Yeah, there you are.
We have an example of success where a good change was made.
Oh, a success. I don't think we have changed sort of the food system as a whole. We have elements of change which are there. For example, I mean, one of the examples I showed here, we have now probably 350,000 farmers who are doing this sort of integrated production system across Africa, where they don't use any inputs and actually increase the production. For example, that's one piece of that food system. But to really a whole system change, I don't think I have a good example to show you. Now again, there are countries like Sikkim is decided to go 100% organic. They're not there yet, but they're doing it. And this is great because it shows that some people actually say they want to go and do it.
What is different in that country where the success was, where the 100% organic was? Why did they reach that success? Why did they do it? How did they do it?
How difficult it is to get 100% organic?
How did they do it?
It's not difficult, we just have to decide. The policy environment has to be right. We have to stop subsidizing the wrong stuff and start to subsidize the farmers who want to do the right thing. Because you cannot change the system.
What is the success factor of Sikkim? That was the question. Why is Sikkim making this turning point? What is the success?
Why? Because they decided to do it. It's good for them. I don't know exactly why they decided. I mean, a lot of, you know, in certain countries where they have not gone too far off the wrong side, it's probably also easier to go 100% organic. But they see an advantage, a commercial advantage, a cultural advantage, so an environmental advantage in particular. I mean, that's like Bhutan too. I mean, they're talking about it and we are working with them there. They want to go in that direction. And so you get that there's people who want to go.
In the meantime, I can maybe give a little answer to the question. Austria is an example in Europe where now 21% of all agriculture is organic. And if you ask how come, that's mainly because the Austrian government had vision already in the early 90s. Before they became members of the EU, they said, we want to support the small farmers, the mountain farmers, etc. And how do we do that? By negotiating with the European Union that the agri-environmental programs, which is the programs that support farmers who take measures for nature, conservation and environment, they should be strong when we become members of the EU. And that has really helped to get many, many farmers into thinking. It's not only that they became part of the technical agri-environment programs, but especially that they became aware of the new kind of services that farmers can offer to society. And I think that was a vision in Austria, thanks to the NGOs in Austria and the government of Austria.
Okay. So thank you, Hans. After the next talk, we have another conversation. So it's a pleasure to invite Professor Rattan Lal on the stage. Please come in, and he is now at Ohio State University, also president of the International Union of Soil Sciences. And Martin was telling me, 2009, you were partly a winner of the Nobel Prize to the IPCC. Because IPCC got the Nobel Prize together with Agro, and you were involved in that. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Hans and I were colleagues about 50 years ago, Hans, in Africa. And I heard Peggy, whenever we beat University of Michigan and Michigan State, they're called the Ohio State University. When you beat us, we call Ohio State University. Since last many years, we have been the Ohio State University. I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon sequestration, and I think I can operate from here. Yeah, it works. It's a quotation from Sir Albert Howard. Many of you know who is. Life on the earth depends directly on the balance between producers, crops, which have the ability to fix solar energy, consumers, people and animals, and decomposers, the unknown or little investigated world of soil life. And I think Hans already said that it was Sir Albert Howard who said it was his presidential address to Indian Science Academy, where he was president in 1928, when the title of his speech was "The Health of Soil, Plants, Animals and People is One and Indivisible." I think we can extend it one further. The health of soil, plants, animal, people, and ecosystems is one and indivisible. That means that we have soil, which is a living entity. Essentially, all life depends upon the soil. There can be no life without soil, and no soil without life. They indeed have evolved together. And rhizosphere, that the very close nanoscale root-soil interface, may be the only site in the universe where the death is transformed into life. Only place where the death changes into life. So soil is a living thing. I defined soil health, published in 2016, soil's capacity as a dynamic and biologically active entity within natural and managed landscapes to sustain multiple ecosystem services, including net primary productivity, food and nutritional security. Hans mentioned about that. Biodiversity, water purification and renewability, carbon sequestration, air quality and atmospheric chemistry, and elemental cycling for both human well-being and nature conservancy. The nature is very important part. So soil health is something we must determine. That brings me to the question of how do we meet the food demands of the world? Right now, we have 821 million people who are undernourished. We have 2 to 3 billion people who are malnourished. So how do you meet the food demands of the world? As a soil scientist, I think we produce enough food to feed 10 billion people. So what do you have to do? Reduce waste. We have 30 to 50% waste. We have 1 billion tons of grains produced which never reach any stomach. They are wasted. Wasting food is a crime against nature. There is no other word for it. Secondly, we must increase access to food by addressing poverty, inequality, wars, and political instability. That's where the food security is a problem. We must improve distribution of the food. At the same time, we must increase use of pulses and plant-based diet and alternate sources of protein that do not necessarily have to be animal-based protein. We must accept personal responsibility of not taking the gifts of food and soil and ecosystem services for granted. They are highly valuable commodity. We must never waste them. And we must increase agronomic productivity from existing land, restore degraded lands, increased biological nitrogen fixation by lagoon, and converting some agricultural land back to nature through sustainable eco-intensification and restoration of soil health. The soil-centric approach that we must adopt to improve ecosystem services. The important concept as a soil scientist is we must reconcile the need of advancing food and nutritional security with the necessity of improving the environment. We have ignored the environment, and we must reconcile that need through soil-centric approach. So what is eco-intensification? The strategy is to produce more from less. Less land, less water, less input of fertilizer and pesticides, less consumption of energy, and less emission of greenhouse gases. That is the modern agriculture, producing more and more from less and less by improving the efficiency, by increasing soil health. And one thing to understand that from the scientific perspective is to understand the coupled cycling of water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. It is this coupled cycling that successfully implemented generates all the ecosystem services that are part of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is this decoupling that causes the problem. And global climate change might as well decouple these cycles and therefore lead to problems. I'd like to share quickly with you the science of carbon cycle. We have atmosphere. It has a 820 gigaton of carbon. This is increasing every year about 4 to 5 gigaton depending upon year to year. We are dumping into it every year 10 gigaton from fossil fuel combustion. Fossil fuel, by the way, many people think are running out. We have coal, about 3,500 gigaton proven, oil about 230 gigaton, gas about 140. The estimate has gone up since discovery of shale in the United States, other about 250. We have about 4,250 gigaton of proven reserve. We consume 10 gigaton every year. We are not running out tomorrow. I wish we were. We are not. We have plenty of it. But the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. So the fossil fuel hopefully will also end before we run out of fossil fuel. We also convert about 1 gigaton by deforestation and agricultural practices. But we have 123 gigaton from atmosphere, taking back to biota by photosynthesis. 60 goes back by plant respiration, 60 goes into the soil, which is eventually respired back as soil respiration. Soil by 1 meter depth contains 1550 gigaton of organic carbon, 950 of inorganic carbon, so soil total is 2500. We have soil erosion, carrying the sediments into the ocean, and we have erosion that also contributes about 1 gigaton into the atmosphere. If we know this global carbon cycle, at a farm level, at a county level, at a district level, at a watershed level, at a river basin level, at a national, international level, we can understand where the leakage of carbon is. It's understanding this carbon cycle, at the same time understanding the mean residence time, how long the carbon stays in a given pool and where. And the mean residence time is simply the total stock divided by the flux. For example, Ohio State has 50,000 students. We graduate every year 10,000. So what the mean residence time of the students? 50,000 divided by 10,000, 5 years. We can calculate the residence time of the carbon in different pools the same way. The idea is to increase the residence time of carbon in soil and biota, so it stays there longer. So it's not re-emitted in the atmosphere. And there are management systems by which we can do that. So what is soil organic carbon sequestration then? It's the process of transferring carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the soil of a land unit. Please understand the land unit. Sometimes we confuse it. For example, If I bring a manure from another land unit or a mulch from another land unit and put into the unit that you are interested in, and it increases the carbon there, obviously it does. That's not sequestration. That's redistribution. You borrowed from somewhere else. You robbed Peter and paid Paul. You made Paul rich, but Peter got hungry, poorer. That's not sequestration. Sequestration is when you grow plants within that land unit. The biomass from those plants is kept within that land unit. Its mean residence time is increased to improving soil health within that unit. And as its soil health is improved, it produces more biomass, more returns, more adds carbon. That is the sequestration. The other is a confusion. And you hear that confusion quite a lot. That causes misunderstanding. So make sure don't rob your neighbor. It's like a neighbor is sleeping, you pick up the biomass and bring it on your land and say, I sequestered carbon. No, you robbed it. And I think that's a very important part to understand, that definition. Here, let me explain the dynamics of carbon sequestration. Let's say on the x-axis we have time. On the y-axis we have a carbon stock of a given farm, your farm, organic farm, if you want to put it that way. The moment you bring the land from a native vegetation, prairie, forest, savanna, whatever, and you cultivate it, the carbon stock in soil decreases because we are adding less. Also soil erosion happens, decomposition happens. In a temperate climate such as Midwest United States, the loss is about 50% in 50 years. In Nigeria, where I was working, the loss was 50% in 5 years because erosion was very high. The rate of decomposition was very high. If the erosion continues, the carbon continues decreasing over time. If the erosion stops, the carbon stabilizes. At this point in time, if I adopt a better management practice, a cover crop, for example, leguminous cover crop, I can build in the carbon. And after a generation, not overnight, 25 years, the carbon can reach an equilibrium. At that point in time, maybe Hans Herren comes up and say, hey, I have a better system of management of pests. I can increase the carbon further. I can keep increasing at a different time depending upon what adoption I adopt over time as they evolve. It's possible in some cases to go beyond what I started with. Acid savanna in South America is a very good example. They had soil acidity a problem, aluminum toxicity, no phosphorus. You add them, you increase productivity more. But in general, that's not the case. Most of the times you can go to the original level. Therefore, what's the carbon sink capacity? Carbon sink capacity is where you are and how you can put back. That's the carbon sink capacity. Many people ask me, how much carbon can I put back? Well, I can put back what I lost. And that loss you can determine over time. What's the rate of carbon sequestration? If I have a slope of that line, delta y over delta x, I can calculate the rate. I can calculate the mean residence time at the same time, pool over flux. I can adopt many practices. There's no one practice. We have 300,000 types of soil series known in the world. Different climate, different social condition, different biophysical environment, different physiography. Is it possible that we have one particular technology available for 300,000 types of soil series? Do not be naive about it. There is no one silver bullet, but there are some silver principles. It's the principle that we are concerned. Examples of those technologies: conservation agriculture, biochar, agroforestry, organic farming, desertification control, afforestation, pasture management, water harvesting, drip irrigation, you name it. But each of those technologies, don't you ever forget, has its own carbon and water and energy footprint. Each one of them. There is no such thing as a free lunch. You pay a price. Price is not necessarily dollars and cents or euro. Price is the environmental price. That environment price you must calculate. Carbon footprint of each technology you must evaluate. And you must subtract it from that delta y over delta x to get a net rate. When you do not do that, you cheat yourself and everybody else. Just like cheating somebody else's biomass and manure and putting on your land and saying, I increased. No, you didn't. That's a scientific fraud. Very important. Same thing here. So what do? Soil is a bank balance. It's a bank balance. There's nothing else. If you want to increase your bank account, you add more than you subtract. How you do it doesn't matter. It's not a religion for me. The religion for me is that I want to increase by biochar, by organic, by compost, by cover crop, whatever works. Increase it. Increase then what? I lose by erosion, by leaching, by decomposition. You must know what you're losing. Quantify it and add into it through production within that land unit. Then you sequester. And if what you add is less than what you lose, you deplete. Unfortunately, we have been depleting all the time. All the time. And therefore we keep losing it. If you do it properly, under wetland conditions, the rate of carbon sequestration is more than under perhaps CRP, Conservation Reserve Program in Midwest United States, under turf lawn, no-till in Midwest United States, about half a ton per hectare per year of carbon sequestration. Under conservation agriculture with cover cropping, with manuring, all those good things. Net, about half a ton. I have heard sometimes 3 tons, 4 tons, I do not know how. Half a ton, 3/4 a ton, 1 ton is certainly possible. I want to show you an example of, in Ohio, a drought of 2012. We had a serious drought. I had a graduate student, Josh Vanitson here. He is about 6 feet 8 inches tall. You can see the corn. This corn we have been doing no-till since 1972. In 2004, I asked Josh, that was part of his thesis, take away the crop residue to produce bioethanol, biofuel. He did. Since 2004. This picture was 8 years after 2012. Drought happened. 10 feet away, but the same piece of land, same conservation agriculture, crop residue was left on the surface. That's the difference it makes. Leave the crop residue. You take it away for biofuel production or for many other purposes, feeding to the cattle, you pay price. And the price is right here. The question is, what is climate resilient agriculture? This is it. You're looking at it. Recycle the reserve back. Keep the ground covered. Always keep the soil covered. That's the principle. Here is when you have a crop residue, wheat straw, you want to convert into humus. It's not a miracle. If you think it's a miracle, think again. Why it's not a miracle? Here is what happens. The carbon to nitrogen ratio, I was looking at your book a few minutes ago, carbon to nitrogen ratio in crop residue is about 100. Carbon to nitrogen of humus is 10 to 12, maybe 15. Carbon to phosphorus ratio, 200 in residue. In humus, 50. Carbon to sulfur ratio, 500 in residue, 70. Somewhere the nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur has to come before that biomass will become humus. If not, it will go back in the atmosphere. Hans may remember Dennis Greenland. Dennis and I used to do a lot of experiments, 4 tons, 8 tons, 10 tons, 32 tons of crop residue, nothing happening. In Nigeria, why? There was no NPS, another nutrient. How can you convert it? Not possible. We started broadcasting fertilizer. Many people used to joke about it. Hey, you're broadcasting fertilizer for no reason. The reason was we were adding carbon and we wanted to add nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur to see whether you can convert humus, and of course you do. But that's the building block. So understand this science. If you don't understand science, you waste a lot of resources just to try to find the hit and try run. So there is a price then. You had a biomass, there is a price of biomass, you have nutrients, there is a price of nutrients, there is a land, there is a water. Humus has a price. How much is the price? In Chicago Climate Exchange, it's $1 per ton of CO2 because of demand and supply. The real price of biomass and nitrogen and phosphorus and sulfur and water and the land area, $120 per ton of carbon sequestered in the soil. Remember I said Ohio, the rate of carbon sequestration is net is about 1/3 of ton. So per hectare is $40 per hectare. You want farmer to do something? Pay them $40 per hectare per year. You expect them to do free? Forget it. Never will happen. We did those fertilizer conservation agriculture in Nigeria in 1970. I published the article in 1970, 71. Did anybody adopt? No. Absolutely not. Why? The farmers are crazy? Are they going to do service to the global community for doing nothing? No. Not possible. You have to compensate them. And compensate them not economic price of demand and supply. Compensate them on the basis of societal value of the commodity they produce. That the payment for ecosystem services. The cost of ecosystem services of the soil health, of carbon, of humus is essential. So payment for ecosystem services is the only way you can motivate. How much carbon do we need in the soil? Most soil in the root zone about 32%, about 2%. Organic matter 3.5 to 4%. How much is the carbon in the soils of sub-Saharan Africa at the moment? 0.1%. In Punjab, both India and Pakistan, 0.05%. You broadcast fertilizer, you broadcast water, it goes into the groundwater, you drink, it causes cancer, having a cancer express taking patient everywhere. The problem is not of the material, the problem is of the technology. I call that technology without wisdom. You do not understand what you're doing and why. That's the problem. The approach has to be soil-centric. The soil-centric approach. Understand the soil processes, how things happen, and what are the critical. If you did that, for everything same, on average, the yield of crop with a 1 ton of carbon increase in the rhizosphere, 30 centimeter depth, maize yield by 100 to 300 kilograms, that's a global data including Africa, soybean, wheat, rice, you can increase the productivity. You can easily triple and quadruple in Africa, provided your soil health and the critical value of soil organic matter content is maintained. We can increase production in the developing country per ton of carbon, 30 to 50. Remember, we have lost as much as 20 tons of carbon, 30 tons of carbon. Depleted. We can put it back. And I think that is an approach. What you want to call it, to me, it doesn't make a difference. I think we're talking the same thing. We're just talking science versus rhetoric. And I think that's an issue. Here is something which I'd like you to think. Here's the population. 6.4 billion in 2005, 9.7, 9.8 billion by 2050, 10.8 billion by 11 billion per capita food consumption. How much kilocalorie? I have listed there. Cereal production, what is required in megagram, in millions of tons. We listed here. Land area. Notice 720 is right now million hectare under cereal. It must come down by 2100. Must decrease from 720 to 500. Fertilizer use right now 200 million tons of nitrogen. It must come down to 100. No more. Pesticide use the same way. I'm not giving. And yet the desired global average production will go up. So the focus here is decrease the area, decrease the input of chemicals, yet increase the production. Producing more from less by improving soil health. That's the way to do it. Use the best, save the rest. Rest for who? For nature. Send it back to nature. When people say we need additional land area, so many million hectares to feed the people, absolutely not correct. Absolutely wrong. We need more fertilizer? No. We more irrigated area? Yes, but not more water consumption. Our fertilizer use efficiency hardly 20%, 30% at the most. Irrigation use efficiency, the same thing. Improve them because through improving soil health. And that's a method of management. I'd like to, coming to the end, let's think about global peace for a moment. Security. We have security in the x-axis, political, economic, social, environmental. On the y-axis, maybe gender, ethnic, national, regional. In the center of all that is the soil health. You look at anywhere in the world where there's a political instability, civil strife, people jumping into the Mediterranean, doesn't matter what. 65 million refugees change the political map of Europe, you know that. If people were stable, if the ground on which they lived supported them, things probably will not be that bad after all. The center of that, we have soil health, soil organic matter content, food security, water security, energy security, chemicals, climate security, the health and nutritional security, environmental security, the political security, national security, global peace depend upon soil health. Do not ignore it. Do not ignore it. Go back to where the problems are, whether it's Boko Haram, he knows, Hans knows, I know, the Lake Chad, which is mud puddle, was a beautiful area. What did it give rise to? You look at the Aral Sea, wherever the environment are degraded, people are mirror image of the landscape on which they live. You drive through a landscape in Holland this morning, you see it beautiful, you know the people are healthy and living nicely. You drive through somewhere else, and if the landscape is degraded and depleted and eroded, you know what the people are also. And there's a very good link between the two. I'm coming to the last, and I want to share with you what I just said in a summary way. Think about soil and crop and soil health as a global soil platform, base of a pyramid. Our global soil resources are healthy carbon pool. This pyramid has 4 sides, and one of the sides is food security. The other side is climate security, adaptation and mitigation. The third side is water quality and renewability. The fourth side is really biodiversity. This pyramid is stable if the corner where the fourth side joined together is cemented together. If it's not strong and cemented together, the pyramid is no longer stable. Those ecosystem services, which are reason for political stability and peace and security, fall apart. And you know they fall apart. And this stability of that corner is a girdle around it. And that is the political will and governance, the decision making. We have elections coming up in the United States. I never hear any platform by anybody talking about environmental issue, talking about soil health, talking about improving, restoring the ecosystem services created. It's not their fault. It's fault of people like me. We do not communicate with them. There is no channel of communication, dialogue between the scientific community and the policymaker. And without policymakers, we cannot do anything. We cannot. So this dialogue, education, I'm glad students are here. Education at all levels. Why soil science is not being taught at primary school, secondary school, all the way? Why it's not essential subject everywhere? Our life depends on it. Why are we ignoring it? And I think this is a part which is essential. I'm glad you're doing it. And I think with that, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe Hans wants to ask a question, or someone who feels like, okay. Okay, well, no, you have to answer them. Here, please.
Thanks a lot for your information on the soil. And I really appreciate the pyramid you showed, where you saw that the base is from the soil and the spiral. And this makes me think, why do you think, even if the scientific world is clear about the beneficiaries of a healthy soil, and soil being the engine of the agricultural systems, why hasn't there been a push from the scientific world to create certification standards for soil before any system has started on the land or on the soil?
I think matter of education. It's a realization that I want to go back to a comment that Hans made, the Green Revolution. I personally believe at that point in time in the 60s, and I went through that situation, probably it was a shortcut that we have improved variety and we put fertilizer and irrigation, you can increase the yield. If we had taken a soil-centric approach, you improve the soil health, it may have taken longer time. And it does take a long time. Remember I was talking about generation. When you change a system, the overnight We used to be at IIT, and then every 6 months we have a board meeting. Tell me what you have done with the taxpayers' money. Well, I cannot cause a revolution overnight. So that takes longer time. So it's that part. One thing is a long time, slow. The other thing is a quick response, and a quick response is not always the best response. So education at all levels, general public education, education of the policymaker, education of school children, making sure our school children actually do practice planting, transplanting tomatoes or celery or whatever. They get familiar with this smell of soil, smell of healthy soil versus smell of degraded soil. I think soil is the foundation of life, and I personally believe that we have ignored it. We have taken it for granted. That was the word I was using. And the only way to do that is in a meeting like this, in a meeting, in a public meeting. I'm glad Mayor is here, policymakers should be here. They should be all aware that there is no way that we can ignore a basic resource on which the entire life depends.
Okay, great, thank you. Any more hands, any more questions? There's another one there too. There's another microphone, please. Take another couple of minutes.
Could you share with us your opinion on the idea of planting a lot of trees and creating forests here in the Netherlands as a solution to, as a contribution to climate adaptation, and do that on agricultural land?
I'm not sure I understood.
I would like your opinion on the idea of planting trees, so creating forests on agricultural land here in the Netherlands.
Yes. I think I should have mentioned about the total potential of carbon sequestration. I took out, after I realized I had only 25 minutes, I took out this slide. There was an estimate, and the paper is going to come out next month, November. About 15 of us from around the world estimated if we planted trees everywhere in the world, wherever the tree growth is possible, the total potential of carbon sequestration in trees is about 160 gigaton between now and 2100. 160 gigaton, billion ton. In soil is another 170 gigaton between now and so soil and trees together can improve. So we have a total potential of carbon sequestration potential. Remember I showed you the diagram where we are in soil now, where we can be between now and 2100, not tomorrow, 80 years from now. I don't know about you, but I'll be here. I do want to see it. So we have 330 gigaton, and each gigaton is about 0.5 parts per million of CO2 drawdown. So you're talking about 165 parts per million of CO2 drawdown in the terrestrial biosphere, both soil and vegetation. So if even 1/3 of that we can realize, 50 parts per million, we can certainly achieve 1.5 degrees centigrade limit. But we must take action now. Do not keep waiting. That's the important part.
Okay, great. So one more, the lady there, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question. We need action now, as you said, as the IPCC said also just a few days ago. The emphasis in Europe and in Holland is very much on energy as a solution for the decrease of the as contribution to the climate thing. How do we get politicians so far that they take nutrition and soil as the base as well? Because we are far away from that still, and we need it to be clear for them as well now.
That's a very good question. In my career, I had the best moment when, remember, COP21 was held in Paris in 2015? COP21 held in Paris in 2016, I think, 2015, December. Mr. Stéphane Le Foll, the then Minister of Agriculture of France, actually came to my lab along with his advisors, 8-10 of them, to discuss what action can be taken. The program called 4 per mille, 4 per thousand, increasing carbon in soil of the world 4.4% was actually discussed in my lab, and they implemented it. Here was an example, a policymaker coming to scientific community saying, what can we do? That was a very good, the trouble was, if you remember from that one, they demanded $100 billion. $100 billion. We discussed 4 billion acre of cropland, $16 per acre according to the cost I was telling you. I was suggesting to him $64 billion allocate to agriculture to do it properly. Next year, Mr. Laffolle went to see Prince Charles. I had the honor to accompany him along with others. He spread the word. But Prince Charles' suggestion was, look, we have no resources. We have to reallocate. For that $100 billion, $1 billion was contributed. I will not tell you which country it was, and it was taken back. We are back to where we were. Next year, the Marrakesh meeting, COP22, Marrakesh adopted a program called AAA. Again, there were 28 African heads of state there. I was there, I talked to them. I presented the same talk over there. Everybody likes it. Was it implemented? No. Our priorities are not there. So somewhere we have to reallocate the resources and prioritize it. But also there's a problem. The politicians are changing. I was very pleased to see in France this year, and I had the honor to meet the French Prime Minister. They started a program called Planet A. And he gave a lecture there. Planet A means there is no planet B. This is it. So policymakers actually are now, especially in Europe, are now taking lead and vision. And the scientific community, I asked my colleague, 65,000 soil scientists that I have the honor to preside at the moment, I tell them, seize the moment. Now is the time. Support them. We must support policymakers who take that kind of positive decision. I certainly will.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Hans Herren, also. Hans, an applause for Hans. Big hand. I mean, they will be here, so you can go to them and talk and have questions. By the way, New Zealand has decided 1 billion trees. So the Prime Minister of New Zealand, 1 billion trees. So many other countries could do the same, you know? Maybe the Netherlands should do 1 billion trees. Just an announcement. We're not going to break for coffee, and during coffee, we need to choose the session we're going to be at. So at 10:40, there'll be 4 parallel sessions.